year 2194, humanity faced its darkest hour. Earth, once a thriving home to billions, had been overrun by the Xenomorphs, a species of alien creatures so ruthless and deadly that they brought civilization to its knees. Yet, amidst this chaos, a daring plan emerged to reclaim the planet. At the forefront of this plan was General A.L.W. Spears, a man whose vision and ambition were as grand as they were controversial. Spears believed that the key to humanity's survival lay not in the destruction of the Xenomorphs, but in mastering their potential. He had spent years preparing for this battle, forging an army unlike any the universe had ever seen. These were not human soldiers, but tamed Xenomorphs, a testament to Spears' belief in the ultimate weaponization of the perfect organism. Spears' confidence in his strategy was unshakable. He viewed this battle not just as a fight for Earth, but as a defining moment in human history. Success would vindicate his methods, secure more resources for his experiments, and cement his legacy as the savior of humanity. The stakes could not have been higher. But to understand how humanity reached this desperate point, we must look back 2 years, to 2192. Space had become humanity's new frontier, but it was also a graveyard for abandoned vessels. Among them was the Junket, a massive cargo ship left adrift in orbit. The ship was a relic of a bygone era, its nuclear engines deemed too costly to retrofit or refuel. Corporations often abandoned such vessels, leaving them to decay in orbit until gravity pulled them into Earth's atmosphere to burn up. It was the job of the Coast Guard, now a spacefaring force, to intercept these derelicts and destroy them before they posed a threat to Earth. So, as you said in the thing, man, this is in Canada, I think. The Dutton, a patrol vessel, was on one such mission when it encountered the Junket. Initially, the crew expected nothing more than another routine operation. However, as their probe entered the ship, it became clear that something had gone horribly wrong. Inside the Junket, the probe's cameras revealed a scene of unspeakable horror. Bodies floated lifelessly in the zero-gravity environment, their forms mutilated and torn apart. Tormented. Blood smeared the walls, and words scrawled in the victim's own blood painted a grim picture of their final moments. Kill us all, please, it hurts, and do it now. Bullet holes, acid burns, and shredded bulkheads told the story of a desperate struggle. Among the wreckage, the crew's probe detected signs of xenomorph activity. Before the Dutton could retreat, one of the creatures, drawn by the probe's movements, attacked. In a matter of moments, the Dutton was destroyed, but not before its crew transmitted vital data back to Earth. The data recovered from the Junket painted a chilling picture. Logs from the ship's crew revealed their fateful encounter with the Xenomorphs. It also included coordinates to what was believed to be the Xenomorph homeworld. This discovery could have been humanity's chance to strike at the heart of the alien threat. However, the situation took a darker turn when Bionational Corporation, a powerful private entity, intervened. Bionational had recovered the Junket's lone survivor, James Lakowski. Unbeknownst to the public, Lakowski had been infected by a facehugger and was carrying a Xenomorph queen embryo. Rather than alert the government, Bionational saw an opportunity for profit. They placed Lakowski under observation in their secretive labs on Earth, hoping to study and exploit the alien for their own gain. I mean, like, there's a secure place in the jets where I can study and exploit the alien for their own gain. As the embryo inside Lakowski grew, strange phenomena began to unfold. People working near Bionational's labs reported vivid nightmares filled with visions of xenomorphs and apocalyptic imagery. These dreams spread rapidly, affecting individuals across the globe. Some saw the creatures as divine beings, while others viewed them as divine beings. Out of this chaos emerged a cult led by a charismatic televangelist named Alba Hay. Hay preached that the Xenomorphs were humanity's salvation, divine entities sent to cleanse the earth and bring a new era. The cult grew at an alarming rate. Its members, fanatically devoted to their cause, believed that becoming host to xenomorph parasites was a sacred duty. Their ultimate act of devotion came when they raided Bionational's labs and freed the alien queen. This single act sealed Earth's fate. Within months, the xenomorphs spread across the planet, overwhelming cities and destroying entire nations. The cultists aided the aliens, capturing survivors and delivering them to the hives to be harvested. Humanity's once mighty governments crumbled, and Earth became a hellscape of death and terror. So, while most of humanity despaired, General Spears saw an opportunity. He believed that humanity's failure lay in its inability to adapt. Spears' solution was radical. Rather than fight the xenomorphs, he would control them. Through years of experimentation, he succeeded in creating an army of xenomorphs loyal to him alone. These creatures, trained and conditioned, were his ultimate weapon. Aboard his flagship, the MacArthur, Spears prepared for the first battle to reclaim Earth. In his private quarters, he meticulously laid out his ceremonial dress uniform. Adorned with medals and ribbons, and armed with antique revolvers and a ceremonial sword, Spears' attire symbolized his belief in leadership and spectacle. Though unconventional, it was a statement of his confidence and authority. He and his followers agreed to lead him to the conclave, where Metamor and the religious leader would detail to the conclave their ritual for the day. To Spears, this battle was more than a military operation. It was a demonstration, a chance to prove that his methods were humanity's salvation. Victory would not only reclaim Earth, but also secure his position as the leader of a new era. And he fails. Spears brought in the new gods, words to that effect. Unbeknownst to Spears, two survivors of past xenomorph encounters had stowed away aboard the MacArthur, Hicks and Newt. Both had suffered unimaginable losses and carried deep scars from their experiences. They saw Spears not as a savior, but as a madman whose plan could doom humanity if it failed. It's like all point to man. Now the question is, do I go to him now and tell him to save me? Hicks and Newt knew they had to stop Spears. With limited resources and no access to the ship's controls, they began devising a desperate plan. Their mission was not just to survive, but to prevent Spears from unleashing further chaos upon Earth. As the MacArthur approached Earth, Spears gazed out at the planet through reinforced glass. To him, Earth was not just a battleground. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience and his ultimate destiny. He believed that his actions would be remembered as the turning point in history, the moment when humanity rose from the ashes of defeat. Lastly, Spears gazed out at the planet, looking for a moment, his finger touching a screen, the woman in white dress with its permanently hovering gas. Meanwhile, Hicks and Newt braced themselves for the fight ahead. The ship's silence was broken only by the hum of its engines, a reminder of the looming battle. Time was running out, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Hell, if he did anything, happened to them. Any kind of infraction. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and its outcome would determine the fate of humanity. The situation aboard the ship was dire, with tensions running high and desperation creeping into every corner. Hicks and Newt, though battered and worn, had a single goal in mind: survival. The ship they were aboard was a hulking military-grade vessel, designed to withstand tremendous damage. Its sleek, armor-plated exterior reflected the cold, unyielding nature of the galaxy's deadliest battles. Inside, however, was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and reinforced chambers, each echoing with the hum of powerful engines and the distant clatter of machinery. Hicks leaned against a bulkhead, his expression grim but focused. "Guns in the suits won't push us hard enough," he muttered, his voice a low growl. And that doesn't even account for what Spears might do if he decides to take things to the next level. Newt stood nearby, her arms crossed as she listened. She blinked, her face an unreadable mask. Was she genuinely engaged or merely tolerating the grim monologue? Hicks decided to assume the former, pressing on. The drive fields, he explained, gesturing vaguely toward the ship's hull, follow the contours of the vessel. They form an invisible bubble that keeps us safe while we're in warp. If we were hugging the hull, we'd stay in the bubble. But if we were to step outside, just an arm or a leg sticking out, we'd be sliced clean off. The field doesn't play favorites. Newt's brow furrowed. She was picturing the gruesome reality he described, but she said nothing, letting him continue. That field, Hicks added, is better than any armor we've ever come up with. Nothing gets through it, not even light, but that also means we can't re-enter the ship if we step out. Best case scenario, we'd float outside for the entire duration of the warp. Months, maybe even years. Worst case, razor-sharp death. Newt finally broke her silence. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad, she said quietly. Hicks turned to her, his eyes narrowing. Maybe if you enjoyed choking to death on your own CO2 after running out of oxygen. And even if we didn't suffocate, when the ship eventually dropped out of warp and started decelerating, our bodies would keep going. We'd become eternal debris, tumbling endlessly through space. There are better ways to die. Newt gave a small, bitter laugh. And worse. Lurton, Hicks nodded. Yeah, there are worse. But that leaves us with one real option. We wait. He glanced around the room, his jaw tightening. Spears doesn't want to destroy this ship. Not with his army on board. Maybe we can threaten him. Tear out the ship's computers or take control somehow. Hell, maybe we can ram the bastard into a star. Newt looked skeptical. Do you think he'll give us a chance? Hicks shrugged. Maybe when we drop out of warp. Until then, we've got nothing but time. Time to think. Time to come up with something. And maybe time to regret. The room fell silent, and butterflies hovered to wish. I wish we were dead. Her gaze hardened. You knew Mitch was an android. You knew before I even met him, and you didn't tell me. I fairly gabbed out what I had to say, but I began to feel sick as Phoebe reached into her pocket. Hicks sighed deeply, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, I knew. And I tried to warn you, didn't I? Told you to steer clear of him, but you wouldn't listen. Anne wondered if that was true. Was it fair to blame oneself for one's current roof? She was constantly going to that place these days. You can't pin this on me, Newt snapped. You should have made me listen. And how exactly was I supposed to do that? Lock you in your quarters? Hicks shot back, his voice rising. You didn't trust me, kid. Didn't think I knew what I was talking about. Just figured I was some old grunt past his prime. Newt looked down, her anger softening into regret. You're right, she admitted quietly. It wasn't your fault. I'm sorry. Hicks felt his own anger dissipate. He sighed again, his shoulders slumping. Jesus, he muttered. Big, tough Marine yelling at a kid. I'm sorry, too. Shut up, again. Before they could continue, a shrill alarm pierced the air, cutting through their conversation like a knife. Hicks stiffened, his instincts kicking in. That's the 10-minute warning, he said. We're about to jump into warp. Newt shivered, the sound triggering memories she'd rather forget. Warp space, Hicks explained, does ugly things to your mind if you stay awake. I was part of the test group once. Half an hour awake in warp, and it made my worst nightmares look like bedtime stories. Newt nodded. She didn't need him to elaborate. She'd had her share of nightmares, visions of the aliens that haunted her every step. Are we screwed? She asked bluntly. Pretty much, Hicks replied. Spears locked us out, dropped a pressure door, and rigged the controls. He's been 2 steps ahead of us the whole time. What if we go outside? Newt suggested, a hint of desperation in her voice. Hicks shook his head. Even if I managed to unseal the hatch, we'd be dead the moment we stepped out. The field would cut us off. Newt frowned. Can we blow the ship? Hicks glanced at her, understanding the impulse. If they were going to die anyway, why not take Spears down with them? This is a military-grade vessel, he said. Our grenades might mess up one section, but the ship's built in airtight armored compartments. We'd die before we caused any real damage. So that's it? Newt asked, her voice hollow. Yeah, it's inattentive for me to be alone. Frankenstein nodded. Your grace, but without you. Unless we can convince Spears to give us one of the escape pods, Hicks replied. But I wouldn't count on him being that generous. Newt gave a bitter laugh. Maybe if we said please. Hicks smirked despite himself. Not likely, but I've got a better idea. If we said or else, we might get his attention. The rest of the conversation unfolded like a high-stakes game of chess, with Hicks and Newt bluffing their way into one of the escape pods. Spears, a ruthless and calculating man, eventually caved to their demands, though not without a bitter grin and a parting insult. Once inside the pod, Hicks and Newt prepared for the final stage of their escape. He'll probably try to shoot us down, Hicks said grimly, but I've got a plan. Newt nodded, her faith in him unwavering. Together, they maneuvered the tiny craft into a blind spot beneath the ship's guns, a move that bought them just enough time to activate the pod's engines and make their getaway. As the pod hurtled away from the ship, Hicks couldn't help but grin. They'd outsmarted Spears, at least for now. Back on the ship, Spears realized he'd been duped. There were no bombs, no hidden threats, just a Marine and a civilian who'd managed to outwit him. For a moment, he felt a flicker of admiration, but it was fleeting. He had bigger plans, and two clever escapees wouldn't derail them. In the cramped confines of the pod, Hicks and Newt allowed themselves a moment of relief. They weren't out of danger yet, but for the first time in what felt like forever, they had hope. And sometimes, that was enough. Hicks leaned back in his seat, letting out a short laugh. I'll pass on seeing his face again, thank you, he said, his tone both sardonic and relieved. But as his expression shifted, it was clear there was more to the story. Hicks frowned, the weight of recent events pressing heavily on him. He got away, though, Hicks muttered, the frustration palpable in his voice. He beat us and got away. I wanted to get him in my sights. There was a certain rawness to his words, a vulnerability rarely displayed. Newt, sitting nearby, offered a pragmatic perspective. You ought to be glad he didn't get us in his sights, she countered, her voice calm but firm. She glanced out the small viewport beside her, taking in the infinite darkness of space punctuated by distant stars. Where are we, by the way? And where are we going? Hicks adjusted the controls slightly before answering. We'll be inside Luna's orbit in another couple of days, he said, the monotony of their journey evident in his tone. That is, if the guidance computer on this piece of junk can be trusted. If you believe in that, yeah. He tapped on the display, which flickered uncertainly before stabilizing. I'm picking up some signals from the region. They're faint, though. Could be automatic transmissions from Earth, or maybe something from the colony on the moon. If it's still there, that is. He paused, considering. Could be Gateway Station in L5 orbit. I've got the scanner set to pick up the strongest input and home in on it. So, Newt leaned forward, curiosity lighting her features. You did really good back there, Hicks, she said, her tone genuine. You're a lot smarter than you let on. I heard myself say. My voice slurred and I blinked rapidly, still waiting for the final locking. Hicks chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. You think so? He asked, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Yeah, Newt replied, her smile widening. And a whole lot smarter than you look. Her teasing drew a genuine laugh from Hicks. For a moment, the oppressive weight of their recent ordeal seemed to lift. But as the laughter faded, reality crept back in. Hicks's thoughts turned to what they had lost. And what they had barely managed to hold on to. He glanced at Newt, his expression softening. He hated losing men, losing ground, and most of all, losing the fight. Yet, she was right. They were alive to fight another day. At least they had that much. And maybe, just maybe, they'd stumbled upon a sliver of luck. Gateway Station was within reach, and it might offer the refuge they desperately needed. Gateway's number was in, and it was going to be closing time. Another appointment with Fim and the police officer's death could wait and listen. He needed someone to favor him, and losing the jeep. A sudden burst of static crackled over the comms, cutting through the silence. Then came a voice. "Approaching vessel, identify yourself." Hicks sat up straighter, exchanging a glance with Newt. He toggled the comm switch and replied, "This is Gateway Station calling," his voice calm but firm. "This is the escape pod from the Colonial Marine vessel MacArthur, 2 passengers aboard, uncontaminated. Repeat, no alien contamination of the ship or pod." A pause followed, then a reply. "MacArthur, you are in the grid. Fly in Lazy 8s until the decontamination team can rendezvous with your vessel. Estimated arrival time, 9 hours. Copy?" Hicks confirmed, "Copy, Gateway. We'll be there." As he leaned back, Newt raised an eyebrow. "They have to check us out? Make sure we aren't carrying any toothy little surprises?" she asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and unease. "That's right," Hicks replied. "And that means the station's clean." He paused, considering. "Gateway's pretty big, about half the size of the old Luna 1, 12, maybe 15,000 people before all the trouble on Earth. Probably built a few more modules since then to make room for escapees. Quarantine?" Newt guessed. Hicks nodded. "Yeah, until they're damn sure we aren't infected. Run us through a CAT scanner, maybe some FLIR. After that, we'll be home free." Newt exhaled, her relief evident. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're finally going to get somewhere safe." Hicks studied her for a moment, his own doubts simmering beneath the surface, but he didn't voice them. Instead, he simply nodded, offering her the hope she needed. Ketty, her brother's friend who had escaped the bleeders, was in his class on the voyage home. He had no doubt that Meanwhile, aboard the MacArthur, Spears remained focused on his mission. His connection with the Xenomorphs had deepened, twisted by his obsession. He stood alone, staring into the shadows where his soldiers lurked. The alien queen, still confined in her reinforced cage, watched him with unblinking intensity. Insarian Spears lit his cigar, the small flame reflecting off the transparent barrier. He spoke to the queen as if she could understand. "The time has come for your children to go forth and do battle," he said, his voice a blend of reverence and command. "You can lay 1,000,000 eggs if you do as you're told, if my soldiers obey me as they should. Do you understand?" Spears tilted her head slightly, her intelligence evident in the subtle movement. Spears smiled, convinced of her comprehension. He continued, his tone almost conspiratorial. "Some will perish in the struggle ahead. I know that. I respect it. But in the end, we will prevail. Together, we will forge a new world." Yeah. His delusions grew with each passing moment, the lines between reality and ambition blurring. Spears's plans demanded sacrifice, and he was prepared to pay the price. He moved to the staging area, where his alien troops awaited, their bodies glistening with acidic slime. The faint sound of chitinous armor shifting filled the air. "Stand by, men," Spears commanded, his voice steady. "The time has come to prove yourselves." As the ramp lowered, rain poured in, soaking the ground. Spears stepped out into the storm, sword in hand, ready to lead his army. But as the first Xenomorph hesitated, refusing to follow his command, Spears's dreams began to unravel. A vessel, defiant and liberation. Incredulous to the realities he had been under, large Spears crumpled, his arm locked, his fist clenched at his side. And everyone around him feasts their eyes on the sight. The queen, observing from a distance, made her move. In a swift and brutal act, she turned on Spears, tearing him apart. His revolution ended before it could truly begin. And with it, humanity's hope of regaining Earth slipped, further away. Back at Gateway Station, Hicks and Newt prepared to face an uncertain future. They were survivors, but survival was no guarantee of peace. As they debriefed and recounted their harrowing journey, they realized their fight was far from over. The alien threat loomed larger than ever, and Earth's fate hung by a thread. In the quiet moments that followed, Hicks and Newt found solace in each other's presence. They had endured unimaginable horrors, and yet they remained standing. Together, they would face whatever came next, because giving up was not an option. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more.